One of the most devastating forms of rejection is feeling misunderstood or unseen. And it's an invalidating kind of experience because you feel as though there's just a disconnect and you can't be seen, right? And a way that this can play out is if you share your writing with someone and they just don't understand it. Now, or maybe they understand it, but there's a wall, or and here's the thing, sometimes that can be extremely helpful because then you know how to communicate better to be understood. But other times it reinforces the disconnect that's why you're writing in the first place. Because oftentimes you're writing to try to be seen and understood, and you're finally having a way of expressing that to be seen. So when you're not seen, it can reinforce and reiterate and compound those feelings of alienation from culture, from your friends, etc. So an example of this is that I went through that was really devastating, that I'm kind of realizing how it's actually hung me up for the past 2 years, which is pretty sad. But I'm writing an SJW serial killer satire. So it's basically SJW woke person who kills people she perceives as out of line, disagreeing with her. And basically she writes them off as what can you imagine? She writes them off as assuming they're white supremacists or Republicans or white cis males. So there's also that idea that we see a lot, which is kind of that straight heterosexual and white people are so inferior. And we see this attitude, and it's like a cute little wink that people can hold this view. Of course, we see it with white people thinking of it of other white people, right? Anyway, so that's what this was this piece that I shared with two of my friends whose opinions I respect and want, I wanted to be seen by them because they're friends that I cared about. So I was in a Zoom workshop in 2020, and actually it was more 2021. It was 2021, spring 2021. Anyway, so we Zoomed. I shared first 2 chapters of this serial killer woke thing, and I felt completely unseen because when we were at the workshop, they didn't talk about what this was satirizing. Like it was so strange. They were like, here's the kind of things that they said were, I want to know, like, what does she eat in the morning, and what does she do? Like it was so evasive. And then there was this kind of like, oh, you should read Joan Didion and do this, and it was so avoidant of what the piece was about in a way that was almost strange. And so it reiterated that my fear of even, because I was afraid to show it to them anyway, because it's mocking this whole SJW moral orthodoxy that we live in, that everyone just takes for granted as complete objective truth, when the fact is it's to me it's another form of collectivism and Marxism that's finding a rationale for resentment and retributive ways of thinking that actually lead to a lot of division and corrosive, bitter relations. Anyway, so when I shared this and I got these kind of feedback, like it was, and then there was kind of the focus on like, well, she's not a very good serial killer. And like the whole thing is not about being like a good serial killer and it's about this culture, and it's exaggerating it in order to make that point. Like it's not about how she's actually, it's kind of supposed to be absurd. Like getting away with the serial killing isn't really like the whole point is that also people actually enable her serial killing because they believe the same as her. Like, oh, those aren't people, those are others. So so to me it was this kind of being unseen, and this compounded my resistance to writing it, because I mean I can write something that follows the moral orthodoxy and get so much social reward, right? In fact, when I wrote a Broad City spec script, which kind of, at the time, I realized it completely was speaking in this SJW voice. Now, I didn't think of it as such at that time, but as I evaluate, I realized that's just kind of another, your beliefs have you, you're ideologically possessed, you're writing a script that kind of takes for granted and has these kind of signals and ways of showing that you're woke. And that's what that script did, because that's what Broad City does, so it does fit the voice, and it's the safest thing I've ever written that feels so safe and well received, because, it goes with the moral orthodoxy and culture and all these little moral, the new religion that we have now, which is this SJW woke. And so that's the thing that I find interesting is I have been in resistance ever since I felt this kind of devastating blow of rejection and feeling unseen by that workshop with my two friends. And I had started that workshop because I thought, I'm going to try to express this, because I was kind of, in that hermit cocoon where I was writing it, but I was scared. But I also I knew that being seen in it would really help me. But then when I got that kind of completely ignoring what it was actually about, almost to the point where it felt to me like they were uncomfortable and they didn't know how to, it's almost like they were in cognitive dissonance because they didn't know how to process this, because that's the whole point, is this is trying to hold up a mirror, and the SJW woke, they don't look in the mirror. They're always projecting that there's the evil other, and that and they don't really understand that that's a story and the framing that they're committed to that's not necessarily true. And so this is trying to hold up a mirror at kind of that, holding that victimhood as a badge, and having to insult heterosexual white cis people in order to feel good about your own yourself, and those kinds of things that are underneath all of this political belief. There's actually a lot of resentment, self-hate, and other psychological, and a kind of avoiding the shadow. So there's a lot of things going on that I kind of want to explore. And so it hurts when you feel like you can't explore it, because that's why you're writing that. And then you get that same reception, so it reinforces your fear. And so how do you get past it? Because I kind of told myself that it didn't matter, and that it would strengthen my desire to express, but that's not true. It didn't strengthen me. It really hurt me. I felt like I would get more of that if I put it out there. Like I thought, well, I'm going to get more of that, and I am going to get more of that, but I'm also going to get a lot of resonance. But it doesn't mean it didn't hurt any less. And so, how do you grapple with that? Because if you really feel alone in the culture, it really hurts your sense of that tribal part of your subconscious brain that craves being seen, being understood, being safe and in the herd, right? So it feels so terrifying, but it also feels really liberating. So it's a really hard feeling to navigate, because you really hate it when you're just living in that kind of bot language where you just kind of stay safe by siding with bullies. But then you also feel pretty alone in being the loner that's calling out culture. But that's what writers do. That's what artists do. They're usually at odds with the culture, and they're not seen. They're seen later. They're seen in retrospect, and they're seen by other people at the time, but not the majority. That's for sure. So you can't, and maybe the majority's the secret majority, because there's kind of a thing where you sometimes you don't know you've got your factory settings beliefs, that you just kind of take for granted, and then you need somebody to kind of articulate it in a way that kind of, oh, actually that's a really good point, that really resonates. So there's kind of ways to like get you out of that cognitive dissonance and factory setting belief. So anyway, I guess this is all this is saying is this is devastating, and it's not like, don't pretend it's not. Like, the rejection of feeling unseen is really hard to deal with, and it's not something that we should pretend isn't happening. It's happening, and it hurts, but it's why you've got to express, because there's going to be people that do get it, and I have, you do meet them, and there's even more of a powerful connection in somebody that sees you and doesn't misunderstand, because it can make you feel free to keep expressing instead of closing up and then thinking, oh, I can't say that, So that's all about this.